Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Thank you for being here. Appreciate all of you showing up every week, every other week, once in a while. We have some people that pop on like a few times a year and say hi. People that show support in any way. People that share with others that they think might enjoy this. Yeah, lots of gratitude, lots of thankfulness. All the time, but especially this time of year, like we're really prompted to think about the things that we're grateful for. And I get a lot out of these meditations. I get a lot out of the actual the actual session that we have here, but the prep that goes into this, the setting up the space within my little room that I have here where I do all of my things. There's a process to it. And I speak about these sessions, these meditations, as well as like the intention and the weekly video, that being a process of creating communication, opening that line of communication and really creating a relationship between us and the astrology, us and the energies, us with, the universal mirror that's out there. This whole entire process that goes into what leads into 8:30 p.m. Eastern Sunday nights, it really deepens that connection for me. So yeah, thank you to all of you. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and put the intention up. They're always released Fridays later in the evenings, so that way you have a little time to sit with it before we come here to this space, to the meditation. I want you to have the intention ahead of the weekly video, so that way you can just have it mulling around in your head and see if there's any connections that are made. But really just sitting with the intention and just seeing what comes up from your own psyche. Are there any thoughts? Are there any feelings, emotions, anything that it makes you move towards, want to move away from? Anything at all that comes up. Just sitting with the phrase and noticing what you notice. That's a big part of the meditation here too, is just notice what you notice. Take what comes, leave the rest, right? So this is our intention for this week. I see curious horizons. I see curious horizons. I was also playing with there are curious horizons. So you can play with that wording too, or you can change the wording to something different. I've said that lots of times, that you can change it to anything that you need to. So this week, I see curious horizons. I see curious horizons. So we have a lot to do with Mercury and Jupiter this week, and that's what we're going to talk about. You've already heard of these aspects if you've looked at the weekly video, or maybe from other astrological places and content and musings that you may take in here. But really, we just have a couple things that are going on. So let's go ahead and a couple things. That does not necessarily mean that there's like little things, but yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the chart. We've been doing this for quite a while now, where we start by looking at the chart and I point out the aspects that are there. If it's overwhelming to look at the astrological chart and it just feels like too much nonsense and jargon, then just look away. I do think that taking it in, even in small bite-sized pieces, helps, because you start to just even if you start to just get familiar with the glyphs, you can start to pick out, some of the more popular images that go along with each planet for the signs and things like that on the wheel, and it just kind of starts to orientate you to it, which is another level of the connection, right? It's a visual representation of what's going on in the sky here. So let's go ahead and put this up here. We have Cancer and Jupiter rising, like we've had for quite a while. That slowly shifts as the days move on. So that's something that we've had for a while, and I've pointed it out a couple times when it felt important, but yeah, that's something that we have for some length of time. So what I want to point out here is that we have Venus in the sign of Sagittarius. You can find that in the 6th house in this chart. So if you find the number 6 in the center, that is the 6th house within this chart. That's the sign of Sagittarius. I am always using whole sign house system within this meditation and a majority of my practice. So each house contains one sign in its entirety. There are no intercepted houses. There are no houses that contain multiple signs or things like that. So you can see Venus has entered the sign of Sagittarius today. If you look at the 5th house, you can see that Mercury is no longer retrograde. Mercury is now direct. So yay, we've made it through that Mercury retrograde period. And that was a big one. That had a lot. You know, we had the Mercury Gazimi right at the new moon. You know, Mercury has spent some time with Mars, spent some time with Venus, spent some time in that grand water trine, has made its way across 2 houses and 2 signs within our charts. So Mercury's had a lot going on. This has probably been definitely one of the heavier Mercury retrogrades of this year. So that might mean that some of us have been feeling it a little more than what we normally do with some of those weird retrograde type things. And then, so that's where we're at today. If we go ahead and move forward, we have the full moon in the sign of Gemini coming through on Thursday. I think it's about just after 6 p.m. Eastern time here. Yep. So this is just a few minutes after, I think it's like 6:13 p.m. Eastern time if I remember the time correctly. But if you look across the 6th and the 12th house here, you will see the sun at 13 degrees of Sagittarius in the 6th house, and directly opposite, you will see the moon at 13 degrees of Gemini in the 12th house in this chart. Full moons are always when the sun and moon are in opposition to each other. So it's the height of the lunar cycle. It's the culmination of the lunar cycle. The lunar cycle starts when the sun and the moon come together. The last time they came together was at the end of Scorpio. That was at new moon where we had the Mercury Gazimi. And then the moon, because it moves faster than the sun does, has made its way around halfway through the zodiac. The sun has moved on to a new sign since then. So now the full moon is in the sign of Gemini versus being in the sign of Taurus, where we had the full moon last month. So we have Venus moving into Sagittarius, we have Mercury direct, and we have the full moon in the sign of Gemini. These are the main things that I want to look at and talk about this week. In the weekly video, I also mentioned the sextile between Venus and Pluto. So that is coming into effect now. The height for that would be tomorrow, Monday, December 1st. And then by the end of the week here, Mercury will be coming into that exact grand trine again. So if we roll it forward to Saturday, you can find Mercury in a trine to Jupiter. That is interesting to note because both Jupiter and Mercury are the rulers of the sun and the moon's position during the time of the full moon. But I did talk about in the last few weeks about how I feel like Mercury is in this grand water trine space until it moves beyond the separation degree, because we are stationing direct here at 20 degrees. We're only 4 degrees away from that grand water trine. We say that the biggest activation range is about 3 degrees. We're 4 degrees away, and since there's been so much of this energy, I feel like it hasn't really left, and we're still sitting right in that. So Mercury is in that grand water trine space this week as well. So in the weekly video, I talked about how there's been some shifts, there's been some changes, right? And those shifts and changes are happening today. Venus has moved from the sign of Scorpio, where it's a little more difficult for her to be her typical Venus type ways. She has to look a little bit deeper. She has to sink into things that might be a little bit heavier, where she might want to be a little lighter, like Taurus or Libra, compared to being in Mars' sign, like Aries or Scorpio. There's really good things that we can get. There's a lot of emotional depth that we can explore, but that's not necessarily what Venus wants to do. Venus does not want to separate things and look at all the little details necessarily. She wants things to be cohesive, that she wants unity. That's not necessarily what you get in the sign of Scorpio. Excuse me. It's a good thing I have my tea here tonight. So now she's moved on to the sign of Sagittarius. She's moved into Jupiter's, excuse me. All right, we'll try to make this quick tonight. She's made her way now from Mars's water sign into Jupiter's fire sign. there is a shift of energy there. There's a shift when a planet moves from any sign to another, but when a planet moves from a place that is considered to be its detriment, a place that is a little bit more difficult, or the planet has to work a little bit harder to be comfortable and to be able to work, and to be able to do whatever it is that she's trying to do, then she moves into a place that is out of that. Even if it's not her home sign, even if it's just like if you're in, think about like being in somebody else's house, and this house that you are in isn't like the cleanest. Maybe it's a little bit smelly, and you know, it's not like up to your standards. So you're not super comfortable in that house, but you have to, there's something that you're there for a reason. You're there to visit somebody, or you're there to help somebody do something, but it just feels a little bit not comfortable. It feels a little icky in some sort of way. I feel like this is a good analogy for Scorpio, because Scorpio can be a little bit creepy, a little bit yucky, and a little bit icky sometimes too. And then you complete your action, what you need to do, and then like you step outside of that house, and like there's fresh air, and there's sunshine, and there's birds, and you're like, oh goodness, I've moved out of that space. Like, you know, even no matter where you're going from there, even if you're stepping into another one of those icky houses for some reason, you have this moment of like, all right, I'm out of that space. So Venus is kind of entering a space like that. Mercury is ending a retrograde period, and a retrograde period that had a lot to do probably with our emotions and our beliefs, a lot to do with our own emotional security, intelligence, a lot to do with raw emotions and discovering things within us, things within other people, and how we react to those type of things. There's been a lot of depth. There's been a lot about beliefs and a lot about learning and knowledge and understandings. And, you know, maybe hopefully there's been some insights that have come through rather than just trying to find the insights and the wisdom, right? There's been quite a journey of reorganizing, rearranging that Mercury has been on. Now we're stationing to go direct. Now we're coming back through that grand water trine space for the last time. You know, the first time a planet comes through this space, especially Mercury came through here with Mars, it could have been a little bumpy. Things could have been coming up in the water realm that could be a little bit difficult. And, you know, we've spent a lot of time talking about this, so I don't know that I necessarily need to drone on with all of that. Like what the specific significations of water are. But they're sensitive areas, they're tender spaces, they're places where things accumulate, right? We're talking about our memory body, we're talking about our origins and our ancestry and our personal private origins and, you know, our history, what has brought, everything that has brought us up to this very moment. And that's not all sunshine and roses for any of us. So Mercury has been through this process of reworking, revisiting, re-pulling things up and hashing things up in the sign of Scorpio. And the things that we pull up in Scorpio, like I said, they can be a little icky. They can be a little bit yucky. They can be a little bit like, oh, this has been marinating in the mud for a while. I haven't seen it. So now I need to clean it off, or, you know, we need to, you know, let it dry out, or, you know, whatever the thing may be. So Mercury's entering this new phase, right? The retrograde period, the cazimi from the retrograde period, the inferior conjunction, brings Mercury into a brand new synodic cycle. It brought Mercury from the evening star phase into the morning star phase. So it's starting a new cycle. It's initiating something new. It's youthful, it's anticipatory, it's exuberant, and it's hopeful, and it's forward moving, and it's looking to start and blaze down a new path. When it's still within that retrograde period, everything might not be quite clear about the path that we're going down. We know we're going down a new road, we know we're changing things, but maybe we don't quite have all of the pieces. Maybe there was some clarity and some insight that came through with the cazimi, with that new moon. But there was still pieces that are coming together. Now that Mercury is moving direct, maybe we have more pieces, and now we can start putting them together in a little bit more of a clear way. Maybe some of those roadblocks have left our way. It's a new process. It's a new way for Mercury. Mercury, within its own right, is a curious planet. It likes to ask questions. It likes to rearrange things. It likes to consider opposite things and how they can work together. It considers multiple things at one time and seeing how they can be possible. Think about Mercury in the sign of Gemini, one of its home signs, which is where our full moon is happening this week. Venus is moving into the sign of Sagittarius, the place of Jupiter, the place of the archer, the centaur, right? The new horizons and the one that is looking to find the light within the dark, right? I feel like curious horizons is a very Sagittarian, very Jupiter-like phrase. Sagittarius is that sign, that mutable sign that is within the darkest half of the year. The light is at its dimmest. We have the least amount of daylight within Sagittarius season. You can see this literally from the northern hemisphere perspective, or you can just see it symbolically from the story of the sun, which is born in the sign of Aries and makes it all the way through the sign of Pisces. And I've talked a lot about how, you know, all of the symbolism, all of the meanings and the significations of all of the signs comes from, and all of the rationale between you know, the rulerships and the domiciles and the exaltations and the planetary joys and all of these different little nuances within astrology. It's all based on the alternation of light and dark. What is the quality of light within this time of year? Is it dominant? Is it, or is the light dominant, or is the dark dominant? Is the light increasing, or is the dark increasing, right? Kind of like that. Are we in a place where we're getting ready to shift the quality of light? Are we moving from a space from dark increasing to light increasing, or light increasing to dark increasing? Those are one of the spaces Sagittarius finds itself in. Darkest half of the year, getting ready to hand over that quality of light from dark increasing to light increasing. At the winter solstice, 0 Capricorn, we have the place where the light starts to come back. The birth and the light emerges. It's still the darkest half of the year. We still have the longest days, or the longest, shortest, blah, blah, blah. We still have the shortest days if you're in the northern hemisphere. But that light is slowly starting to come back. We can see a path forward to spring. If you think about the first of the year and the resolutions that people make for New Year's, they are looking towards something new. You know, this time of year, there's a lot of people that are having lots of gatherings and enjoyments and, you know, maybe lots of indulgements. And you hear a lot of like, after the new year, I'm going to X, Y, and Z. Whether we hold to those things or not is a different story. So I think we have a curious shift and a curious change for both Venus and Mercury this week, okay? Mercury has a history and a process that has brought it to the moment that it's in. It has been shaken up in the water world. It has been flooded. It has been saturated. It has been rehydrated. It has been healed. It has been nourished. It has had a lot thrown at it, right? Maybe it's been washed out. Maybe it feels like it's been cleaned and it's been pured. It can be different for all of us. Now it's moving forward, moving back through that space one last time. Direct. Okay? It has more tools, it has more resources, it has more experiences. So maybe the watery things that have come up for us through October, through November, maybe now mentally, maybe now within our resources, we can start to move forward. And at the same time, Venus moves into the sign of Sagittarius. She moves from a place that is difficult to a place where she was ruled by Mars, which is in Jupiter's sign, but now she's ruled directly by Jupiter, even though she's co-present with Mars and both the sun. There's this more shift towards Sagittarius and towards Jupiter-like activity. So if Jupiter brings optimism, if Jupiter brings the will to move forward no matter what is there, right? If Sagittarius brings us into a space where we know there's a lot of dark, we know there's a lot of depth that is around us, you know, there's a lot of, there's maybe a lot of reasons to not feel hopeful and to not feel faithful that the light is coming, to not to, you know, feel a little bit discouraged because there's a lot of dark, there's a lot of depth, right? That doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it's a deeper, more reflective space. And I think the ego within all of us, which we all have to have some level of ego, prefers that solar, that outward in a little bit of some sort of way. So Venus is coming into this space where she may be very uplifted and she may feel like she just can take a fresh breath of air. Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer where it's exalted. So she's able to support Venus. Jupiter is able to nourish and give that safe space to Venus, just like the other planets that are in the sign of Sagittarius. So there's a lot about beliefs. There's a lot about our understandings. There's a lot about trying to find the light within the dark. In the sign of Sagittarius, just like in the sign of Pisces as well, both of them are handing over, are mutable signs that are handing over to a lighter portion of the year. Both are in the dark half of the year, but handing over to the light, but handing over to the light in different ways. Sagittarius hands over the light into the sign of Capricorn, where we go from light decreasing to light gaining. So the light is not dominant, but it's growing in strength. Pisces takes us from the space where the light has slowly been growing, and now we are going to go from dark being dominant to light being dominant. So this moves us into the sign of Aries. This brings us into the spring equinox, where we have equal light in day, and then slowly the day starts to increase. So in Jupiter signs, you have this blind faith. You have this being able to pull yourself out of the darkest space and know that the light is coming. Sometimes it's a little hard to find that light is coming space, and we kind of get pulled down into the dark and into the depths in some sort of way, in a fiery way in Sag and in a watery way in the sign of Pisces. But ultimately, we're looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, and we can see it no matter how small it is. So there's a lot about our beliefs. There's a lot about our foundational morals and ethics in the Jupiter signs, okay? So specifically in the sign of Sagittarius here. So now if we look at the full moon that we have coming through later on this week, we have the sun in this place of Jupiter, in this place of beliefs, of morals, of ethics, of all of our values and all of those moral, ethical foundations within our lives. That's where the sun is. The moon is in Mercury sign, in the sign of the sign of Gemini. It's in the place of questioning. It's in the place of looking at small little details. If Jupiter looks at the big picture, which I feel like if we are talking about having faith or having some sort of hope, or like salvation and redemption are big key words that you could use for the sign of Sagittarius, pulling yourself out of that dark, out of that depth. If you have a full moon coming through within the middle of that energy, in the sign of Gemini, where Mercury likes to ask questions, it likes to pull things apart, it likes to look at little teeny details. We may be having a moment where we want to understand a little bit deeper into some of the subtle parts of our beliefs, of the organizing systems that are above us, that the governing systems, right? We have the education system, we have the governmental systems, we have all of these systems that ideally are supposed to give us a form and a function of that hold up to like different beliefs and different morals and different ethics, and it's supposed to give like a it's supposed to give that that ideology framework with the sign of Jupiter, right? So Mercury in Gemini may be questioning some of that. Okay, I believe, I understand, and I fully believe, but where does this information come from? Where is the deeper part of this? It may be wanting to really pick things apart and really get into, well, what is the symbolism of this? What is the deeper meaning of this thing, right? It wants to ask questions and it wants to understand the little bits and pieces. So, you know, maybe if you're somebody that grew up in a specific religion, you know, and you feel those beliefs wholeheartedly within your being, but there comes a point in your faith where you start asking questions. It's not that you don't believe anymore. It's not, it could be. It could be that you find yourself in a space where it's like, how could this be possible? How could these beliefs be true because of X, Y, and Z that you are experiencing, or a loneliness or an isolation? But it could also just be a curiousness and a questioning. I'd like to deeper understand what's behind this. If the educational system is saying we should learn X, Y, and Z, okay, but why? Why should we learn this? Where is the applicable use of this, right? If a governing body says the people will do this, okay, but why? What is the reasoning for it? Please explain to me why. I'm not discrediting necessarily. Maybe we are, but not necessarily discrediting, but I'd like to understand a little bit deeper. So unraveling things, unraveling and looking at deeper meanings here, okay? Being curious to look a little bit deeper, to look a little bit further into something, to see beyond the horizons, right? I think about Sagittarius and I think about the archer and I think about the bow and arrow and the way it shoots. And it shoots in an upward fashion to where it's going to go high and it's going to go far, right? It's not straight up, it's kind of like at an angle. So it's going to go far into the horizon. It's going to reach distances. It's going to reach new heights. I think there's a lot of space for exploration of big things and little things this week here. I think there's space for a turning point wherever the wheels have been turning within your lives. And if we go ahead and move forward into the card for this week, we have the Eight of Swords. Oh, come on. Into focus, please. There we go. We have the Eight of Swords, but it came in the reverse position. Sorry, I'm not super great with this. Yep, Eight of Swords. So when I think about the Eight of Swords, I think about a lot. The first thing that comes instantly to my mind is limiting beliefs. Stopping ourselves with our thoughts, with our minds, right? Finding ourselves in a dark place. Finding ourselves in a place where it feels like maybe we can't see the light. Not on this deck, but if you look at the Rider-Waite deck, it shows a woman who is blindfolded. So if we think about a feminine energy that is blindfolded, we are in a space where we are not able to be receptive to intuitive energies that are coming our way. We are not able to pull things in, and we don't have as much of an awareness of the subtle energies that are around us, okay? Maybe we miss things. So maybe we're distracted by something. It's in the reverse position, so it feels to me like we're given an invitation to let go of these limiting beliefs, let go of where the blindfold has been, let go of whatever has been making it so it's difficult for you to see. When you take that blindfold off, it allows you to be curious. It allows you to look beyond the horizons. It allows you to maybe consider a different part of something that you believe in, or a different value set, or maybe just understand it a little bit deeper by asking questions. I have come to realize in the last couple of years that asking questions rather than like demanding something specific when I'm trying to talk to God or Creator really helps. Just opening up a little wider to be a little bit more curious rather than being so pointed and so fixated. Just opening myself up a little bit more to whatever, I don't know, whatever's going to come, I guess, feels like it's brought me a lot more response than just like asking for something specific. I think about when I think about the Eight of Swords reversed here and all of these things that we're talking about this week, I think about the journey that I am taking right now with the Advent season. I'm not sure exactly how much of this I'm going to share throughout the next several weeks, but I have, for the first time in a long time, created myself an Advent setup with candles and taking that spiritual religious journey that I have taken before as a child growing up in the Catholic Church. I have moved away from some of that, but a lot of those roots are still very much deep within me, but much more of a Christian mysticism type tone to it. So I am walking through the Advent journey through prayer and contemplation and, through ritual. But I'm approaching it in a way that I did not approach as a child growing up in the Catholic Church. I am approaching it from a much more symbolic and, let's just say, widespread. So I'm taking these beliefs that I have and this knowledge set and this understanding and insight that's within me, but I'm going to experience it in a little bit different way. And I think it's interesting that the first week of Advent is lining up with this. And the first week of Advent, the word that goes along with that is hope. Hope of the prophecy, of the coming of the Son of God, right? We can see that many ways this time of year. Think about the winter solstice, right? The coming of the Son of God. S-O-N or S-U-N, right? Kind of like that. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in these coming weeks. But that's just one way where I can see the little teeny details and the journey and the messages coming through a little bit different. Mercury in Gemini has a lot to do about looking at the details within the journey. I think about Mercury and I think about the messenger. I think about the one that takes the prophetic journeys. I think about the one that moves between the material world and the energetic world and can bring messages across, okay? Definitely looking to Hermes to guide me through the Advent season as I take this metaphysical journey here. So there's a lot of space for progress this week, maybe. There's a lot of space for being curious, opening ourselves up to seeing something a little bit different. We have a lot of Jupiter action coming in and Mercury coming through this grand water trine space here for the last time, has all of the tools it's going to have through the grand water trine space that we've been working through for quite a while. So everything that you've gained, everything that you've earned, and everything that you've accumulated through this way, how can you integrate it all? How can you bring it all together? Can you be curious to see the water in a little bit different way? Because after we've been splashed with the waves of this grand water trine so many times, we might just start to feel kind of waterlogged, and you might just start to feel like you're ready to get out of the water. But there's still one last message to come through here. So how can you see it and how can you receive it, right? Receiving those messages and allowing them to penetrate you and allowing them to lift you up in that Sagittarian Jupiter type way. And unbinding yourself. The Eight of Swords in the reversed position, letting go of those limiting beliefs. Wherever you've been blindfolded and you've been bound and you've been stuck by all of those swords, all of those different thoughts, where can you start to release those? Where can you start to let those go? It seems a lot like coming into the darkest portion of the year where we're starting to look forward to the light that is coming, right? We're starting to look forward to the son or to the child that is going to be born this time of year. So I just want to bring in a lot of this curious hopefulness, this youthful, childlike wonder that I feel like could be at foot for some of us. And in a space where maybe the energy has been a little heavy and there's been some accumulation, maybe, maybe this gives us the hope. Maybe this gives us the fresh breath of air that we've been looking for. All right, I'm gonna get ready to move towards our meditation portion here. I'm gonna leave the intention up for just another minute or two. I see curious horizons. I see curious horizons. Being curious opens us up to seeing things that maybe we wouldn't have seen otherwise.